Right now.
I'm an off-duty police sergeant with Phoenix PD.
Everybody suddenly becomes a cop.
My name is Sergeant Marcus Hayes.
The station off Route 118 was busy when it happened. Wednesday morning, 10:37 a.m. The kind of California desert heat that turns a steering wheel into a branding iron and makes the air above the asphalt ripple like a fever dream. Sergeant Corvus Blackwood had pulled in to fuel up on his way home. Nothing more. Off-duty, plain clothes, a fitted black t-shirt, dark jeans, a silver watch catching the glare. He just pulled the nozzle from his tank when 3 ICE agents stepped out of a white government SUV he hadn't clocked pulling in. Tactical gear, deliberate spacing, body cameras already rolling, recording what would become the most expensive gas station stop in California history. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let me know in the comment where you are watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, because what unfolds over the next several minutes will leave you speechless. Trust me, you wouldn't want to miss it. Corvus Blackwood had spent 19 years reading rooms. Not metaphorically, literally. Walk into a domestic disturbance at 2 a.m. and you have 4 seconds to understand who is dangerous, who is scared, who is lying, and who is about to run. You read the hands first, then the feet, then the eyes. You read the space between people, how far apart they're standing, which direction their shoulders are angled, whether their weight is on their heels or their toes. He read the 3 agents before any of them spoke a word. Dominic came center, not because the pump was in the center. It wasn't. He came center because that's where you position when you want to own the conversation and let your flankers do the geometry. Officer Merritt peeled wide left, drifting past the front bumper of Blackwood's car in a half-casual walk that wasn't casual at all. The 3rd agent, moving right, put himself between Blackwood and the station's convenience store entrance without ever making eye contact. Textbook. Clean. Rehearsed enough to look instinctive. They already decided before they parked. Blackwood clocked the white government SUV now. Plates. Tinted windows. Parked at an angle that blocked the exit lane. Not because the lot was full, because the lot was not full. Because blocking the exit lane was the point. He set the nozzle back in the pump cradle. Kept his hands visible. Turned slowly to face Dominic, giving the man's body camera and his own composure every advantage. Papers, Dominic said. Not a question. Immigration check. Blackwood's jaw didn't tighten. His eyes didn't go hard. 19 years had given him something most people never develop. The ability to feel rage as information rather than instruction. He reached into his back pocket. Slowly. Deliberately. Every movement narrated by its own unhurried pace. Driver's license. He extended it between 2 fingers. Corvus Blackwood. California. You can run that right now. Dominic glanced at it the way a man glances at a menu he has no intention of ordering from. We need proof of citizenship. Birth certificate or passport. Blackwood absorbed that. Birth certificate. At a gas pump. In a California desert. At 10:37 in the morning. I'm also a law enforcement officer. He reached again. Same deliberate pace. Same visible hands. And produced his badge. Gold. Metropolitan PD. 19 years of service weight in his palm. Sergeant Corvus Blackwood. Badge number 4471. You can call my precinct and verify in under 2 minutes. I'll give you the direct number. Dominic's eyes moved to the badge the way they'd moved to the license. A formality being dismissed, not considered. We need documentary proof of citizenship, sir. Sir. The word landed like a door being closed. Blackwood felt something shift inside him. Not anger. Not yet. Something older and more precise. The specific, cold recognition of a man who has just understood that no credential he carries will change what this agent decided the moment he saw him standing at Pump 7. The driver's license didn't matter. The badge didn't matter. The badge number, which would pull up 19 years of service, commendations, 0 disciplinary flags, didn't matter. The goalpost would keep moving because the goalpost was never the point. He kept his voice level. I'm offering to have my identity and my credentials verified by my own department right now. All I need is, sir, we need documentary. I heard you. Calm. Quiet. Final. I'm telling you there is a faster way to resolve this that doesn't require either of us to escalate. Dominic said nothing, which was its own answer. 30 feet away, at the adjacent pump, a woman named Sloane Whitaker had been watching since Merritt cleared the front bumper. She didn't make a production of it. She simply lifted her phone, screen angled slightly away from the agents, arm resting against her car door like she was checking a text, and pressed record. She had worked in HR for 11 years. She knew documentation when she saw it, and she knew a documentation emergency when she saw one. At the convenience store entrance, Cyprian had stopped walking entirely. The water bottle in his hand had gone warm. He hadn't noticed. He was watching the badge, the real badge, gold, legitimate, undeniable, being looked through by a federal agent who had already decided what he was looking at before he ever got out of the car. 3 cameras were now rolling on Pump 7. Agent Dominic did not care. He had never looked at Blackwood's badge number. He had never reached for his radio to call it in. He had not, in any observable way, treated this as an identity verification situation, because identity was not what was being verified. Something else was being asserted. Something that no badge, no license, no precinct phone number, and no birth certificate produced at a California gas pump would ever successfully challenge. Blackwood understood this now with the full, unambiguous clarity of a man who has just watched a door lock from the inside. He placed his badge back in his pocket. He kept his hands visible. He waited, with the patience of someone who has already decided that everything happening in the next few minutes is going to matter enormously later. He was right. Blackwood spoke clearly. Not loudly, clearly. There is a difference, and he knew it. Loud is emotion. Clear is record. I want to make sure we understand each other. He turned slightly, not toward Dominic, but toward the body camera on Merritt's chest, the Axon unit, the one with the wider field capture. I am Sergeant Corvus Blackwood. Badge number 4471. Metropolitan Police Department. I am off duty. I am not being detained for any lawful reason that has been stated to me, and I am invoking my rights under the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which protects me from unreasonable search and seizure without probable cause. He paused. 1 beat. 2. I am not resisting. I am not a flight risk. I am a 19-year law enforcement officer identifying myself at a gas pump. Dominic's expression didn't change. That was the thing about men like Dominic. The expression never changed because the expression was the strategy. Flat effect as authority. Impassivity as dominance. Blackwood had used the same face himself in difficult arrests, and the recognition of it now, aimed at him by a federal agent who had still not called his badge number, was its own education. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Blackwood didn't move. Not in defiance, in documentation. He wanted every camera in the lot to record a man who was still, a man whose hands were visible, a man who was giving Agent Dominic every possible opportunity to choose differently. Dominic didn't choose differently. 30 feet away, Sloane Whitaker widened her stance almost imperceptibly, planting herself, steadying her phone arm, making sure the frame held. She had not lowered the phone since she raised it. She would not lower it until the government SUV was gone. She had already texted her sister, filming something at the gas station. Do not call me right now. At the convenience store entrance, Cyprian had made a decision of his own. He raised his phone, and then, because he understood instinctively that video without context is just footage while video with narration is testimony, he began to speak into it quietly, but distinctly. I'm at the gas station on Route 118. It's Wednesday, May 7th, approximately 10:40 a.m. There is a black man at Pump 7 who has shown a police badge and identified himself as a sergeant. 3 IC agents are surrounding him. He has not raised his voice. He has not made any aggressive movement. They are now. He stopped narrating. Watched. The cuffs came out. Blackwood saw them and made the decision in the same instant. The decision that would define the next 2 years of his life. The decision that would eventually sit in front of a jury as the single most important piece of behavioral evidence in the trial. He did not step back. He did not raise his hands in protest. He did not say another word. He went limp. Not dramatically. Not as a performance. He simply withdrew all muscular cooperation from his own body. Weight dropping in his heels, shoulders releasing, every joint going passive. The way a man goes when he has decided that his body belongs to the record now and not to the moment. Dead weight. Documented stillness. The physical language of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and exactly why, and who is making absolutely certain that every camera in this parking lot captures the difference between him and them. Dominic grabbed his right wrist. Merritt moved in on the left. The third agent stepped closer, blocking the sight line from the road. Or trying to. He didn't know about Sloan's angle. He didn't know about Cyprian's narration. He didn't know that the Axon unit on his own partner's chest was transmitting in 4K at 24 frames per second, capturing with clinical precision the image of two federal agents forcing the arms of a passive, silent, clearly identified police sergeant behind his back at a California gas pump on a Wednesday morning. The cuffs clicked. The sound was small, mechanical, ordinary in the way that genuinely consequential sounds usually are. Not a thunderclap, not a dramatic sting, just the quiet, definitive sound of metal finding metal. But Blackwood heard it the way you hear a door locking behind you in a room you didn't choose to enter. Final. Documented. Irreversible. He said one more thing. Calmly, facing forward, wrists pinned, weight still passive. I am not resisting. I am Sergeant Corvus Blackwood, badge 4471. This detention is unlawful, and it is being recorded. Nobody responded. Dominic steered him toward the SUV with a hand between his shoulder blades. Merritt fell in alongside. The third agent finally glanced toward the convenience store, saw Cyprian, saw the phone, held eye contact for 2 seconds, and looked away. Sloan Whitaker did not lower her phone. Cyprian kept narrating. The Axon unit on Merritt's chest kept recording. Agent Dominic, walking a handcuffed police sergeant across a gas station parking lot on a Wednesday morning in the California desert, had no idea that he was not ending an immigration check. He was beginning a federal civil rights case. He was generating the plaintiff's exhibit list. He was, with each step toward that white government SUV, writing a number on a check he wouldn't see for another 14 months. A number with 8 digits and a comma in the middle, signed by a jury that would watch this footage in a federal courtroom and understand, in the wordless way that clear video makes things understood, exactly what kind of mistake had just been made at Pump 7. $14 million worth of mistake. And the cameras had caught every second of it. The room was 10 feet by 10 feet. Blackwood knew this without measuring because he had stood outside rooms exactly like it for 19 years, waiting for processing to finish, waiting for paperwork to clear, waiting for the particular bureaucratic machinery of detention to complete its cycle. Concrete block walls painted the color of old teeth. A steel bench bolted to the wall at a height designed for discomfort rather than rest. An overhead fluorescent fixture that did not dim, did not cycle, did not acknowledge the difference between morning and afternoon or consciousness and sleep. It simply burned, steady, indifferent, institutional. The cell smelled like every suspect he had ever booked. That was the thing that hit him first, before the anger, before the legal calculus, before any of the structured thinking he would later apply to every detail of the next 4 hours. The smell, concrete and antiseptic, and the specific human residue of people who had sat in this exact spot and stared at this exact wall and wondered how long. He had processed people into rooms like this so many times that the smell had become invisible to him. Background, professional, unremarkable. It was not invisible now. Now it was the most present thing in the room, and it carried with it a recognition so sharp it was almost physical. The system he had served for 19 years did not know he was on the other side of this door. Or it knew, and it didn't care. He was not yet sure which was worse. He sat down on the steel bench. He had not been read rights he didn't technically require. He had not been formally charged with anything, because there was nothing to charge him with, because this was not an arrest in any legally defensible sense of the word. It was a detention, which is a different word that carries the same walls and the same locked door. He had been offered a phone call the way things are sometimes offered in federal facilities. Mentioned once, briefly, by a desk officer who did not make eye contact and did not follow up. Blackwood had given Cyprian's number from memory before the cell door closed, and he did not know whether the message had been passed or whether it had evaporated somewhere in the indifferent space between the desk officer's mouth and any actual action. He looked at his wrists. The cuff marks were fading already. He hadn't struggled, so the pressure had been even minimal. His watch was still on. They had not taken his watch, which meant this had not been processed as a formal arrest, which meant somewhere in the paperwork, or in the deliberate absence of paperwork, someone understood that what had happened at Pump 7 did not have a legal category that would survive daylight. That absence would matter later. He filed it. The fluorescent light buzzed at a frequency just below conscious annoyance, just present enough to prevent the kind of settled silence that allows real thinking. He recognized this too. The design of discomfort, so incremental it cannot be complained about, so consistent it cannot be escaped. He had never thought about it as design before. It was design. Everything in this room was design. He thought about the cameras, Sloane's phone, Cyprian's narration, Merritt's Axon unit, his own department-issued body camera, which he had not been wearing because he was off duty, which meant the footage that existed was theirs, government footage that the government would now have to decide what to do with. He had 19 years of institutional knowledge about what agencies do with footage that is inconvenient, and none of it was reassuring. But Sloane's phone was not government property. Cyprian's narration was not subject to an internal review process. Those two things existed outside the machinery that was currently holding him in a 10-by-10 room under fluorescent light on a Wednesday morning, and no desk officers in action could reach them. He sat with that, let it settle into something that was not quite comfort, but was adjacent to it, the cold, structural reassurance of a man who knows the facts are intact, even when everything else is not. 40 minutes away, Cyprian was already moving. He had not waited to see whether the message reached Blackwood. He had called Sergeant Miriam Thorne directly, found the number through the precinct's non-emergency line, identified himself, described what he had witnessed and recorded at Pump 7, and stated the name and badge number he had heard Blackwood repeat 3 times into the cameras. Thorne had not asked him to repeat himself. She had asked him which federal facility. Then she had ended the call and got in her car. She arrived with a printed copy of Blackwood's full-service record. 19 years, commendations, 0 disciplinary flags, current active badge status, and placed it on the desk in front of the facility officer with the particular energy of a person who has decided that calm professionalism and absolute immovability are not in conflict. The desk officer looked at the record, made a call, waited, made another call. The second call was shorter than the first. 4 hours and 11 minutes after the cuffs clicked at Pump 7, the cell door opened. No one apologized. No one explained. No paperwork was offered documenting the detention, the basis for it, the duration of it, or the identity of the agents who had initiated it. Blackwood stood, straightened his T-shirt, and walked out into the afternoon light, which was harder and hotter than the morning light had been, the sun having moved while he sat under fluorescent tubes that did not acknowledge time. He noted the absence of paperwork the way he noted everything now, precisely, permanently, with the part of his mind that had been cataloging evidence since the moment Dominic's hand closed around his wrist. That absence would become Exhibit A. He just didn't know it yet. Alaric Voss did not own a single piece of theatrical courtroom clothing. No dramatic scarves, no power shoulders, no calculated accessories chosen to signal something to a jury. She wore charcoal suits and flat shoes, and she carried 1 legal pad and 1 pen, and she had 111 of her last 13 civil rights cases, and the 2 she had not won she had settled for numbers that made the defendants wish they had gone to trial. She did not need theater. She had something better. She had 5 synchronized video files and 14 months of patience. The pretrial motions had taken most of those 14 months. The government's legal team had challenged the admissibility of Cyprian's recording on jurisdictional grounds, challenged Sloane Whitaker's footage on chain of custody technicalities, and filed 3 separate motions to have the Axon body camera footage reviewed in chambers before any courtroom presentation. Judge Talia Sterling had denied all 3. She had done so in written rulings that were notable for their brevity, the judicial equivalent of a raised eyebrow, and the government's team had arrived at trial knowing that everything that existed was going to be seen. Voss had spent those 14 months doing one thing with the footage. Nothing. She did not leak it. She did not brief journalists. She did not allow any edited clip, any frame, any timestamp still to exist anywhere outside the formal discovery process. She wanted the jury to see it the way Sloane Whitaker had seen it, in real time, unmediated, without the pre-formed interpretation that comes from having already seen a 30-second version online. She wanted it to land. DHS spokesperson Leora Kane had issued a statement 11 days after the incident, describing the stop as consistent with standard enforcement protocols in an active operational zone, expressing confidence in the professionalism of its agents, and noting that the matter was under internal review. The statement was 4 sentences long and contained no names, no acknowledgement that the detained individual was a law enforcement officer, and no explanation of what operational intelligence had prompted the stop. General Valerius Kane, no relation to the spokesperson, a coincidence that confused exactly one journalist, had issued a supplementary statement from the department's upper command structure noting that the agency took all allegations of improper conduct seriously and remained committed to lawful enforcement practices. It was the kind of language that is written specifically to mean nothing while appearing to mean something, and Voss had read both statements and underlined nothing because there was nothing worth underlining. What was notable about both statements was identical to what was notable about the cell paperwork: the absence. Neither statement named a reason for the stop. Neither statement identified a legal basis. Neither statement contained the word citizenship or profile or badge. The jury would notice the absences. Voss will make sure of it. She opened her case in Judge Sterling's courtroom without an opening monologue. She introduced herself, stated the nature of the claim, and asked the court's permission to play the footage. Sterling nodded. The room went dark. They watched Merritt's Axon unit first, the widest angle, the one that captured the tactical triangle forming before any words were spoken. Then Sloan's phone footage, which had the clearest audio of Blackwood's voice stating his name, his badge number, his precinct, his amendment. Then Cyprian's narrated recording, which provided the only running civilian commentary, and which contained the moment, time-stamped, unedited, when Cyprian's voice dropped to something almost inaudible and said, simply, "They're putting cuffs on him." Voss did not comment on any of it. She let it run. She let the courtroom sit in the silence after the last file ended, and she let that silence do the work that no argument could do better. And then she turned to the witness stand where Agent Dominic had been sitting for the past 40 minutes. She did not ask him what he saw. She asked him what he knew before he got out of the car. Specifically, was there an intelligence report that had flagged the location? No. Was there a tip from a confidential informant regarding activity at that station? No. Was Blackwood's vehicle registered to a flagged individual in any federal database? Dominic paused before answering. Voss waited. No. Had Blackwood's license plate been run prior to the approach? Another pause. It had not. Was there any written operational directive that identified that gas station as a target location on that morning? No. Voss let each answer settle before moving to the next one. She was not building to a dramatic revelation. The revelation had already happened on the screen behind her. She was building a foundation, answer by answer, absence by absence, for the question she had been saving since she first watched the footage 14 months ago. She asked it quietly, almost conversationally. "Agent Dominic, in your own words, what was it about Sergeant Blackwood that prompted you to initiate the stop?" The pause this time was different from the others. The others had been tactical. This one was the sound of a man understanding that every available answer is the wrong answer, and choosing between them anyway. He fit a profile, Dominic said. The courtroom did not react. It absorbed. There is a difference. Reaction is noise. Absorption is the thing that happens before a jury goes into a room and agrees on a number. Voss nodded once, made a single mark on her legal pad, and said she had no further questions. The jury had heard fit a profile. They had also seen 5 synchronized videos of what that phrase looked like in practice: the triangle, the dismissed badge, the cuffs on a passive man, the locked cell, the missing paperwork. They began deliberating a number. It did not take them long. The foreperson read the number the way forepersons always read numbers, flatly, procedurally, as though the figure were a scheduling notice rather than the largest wrongful detention award in the state's recent history. $14 million. The words took less than 2 seconds to say. They had taken 14 months to earn. The courtroom did not erupt. It exhaled. Not the exhale of relief. The exhale of a room full of people who have been holding something heavy for a long time and have finally been permitted to set it down. Journalists stopped typing for a single beat. The government's legal team exchanged a look that contained an entire internal conversation. In the gallery, a woman Blackwood did not recognize pressed both hands over her mouth and closed her eyes, and he did not know her story, but he understood, in the particular way this case had taught him to understand things, that she had one. Blackwood sat still, the same stillness he had held at Pump 7 with cuffs going onto his wrists, the same stillness he had held on the steel bench under the fluorescent light that did not cycle, the same stillness he had maintained through 4 months of depositions in which the government's legal team had asked him, in 17 different formulations, whether he had done anything to provoke the encounter, a question whose persistence was its own answer. He had not moved toward that stillness during the trial. He had not performed it. It was simply what 19 years of learning to feel rage as information rather than instruction had built in him, and it held now the way it had held at the pump, completely, quietly, without visible effort. Alaric Voss placed her hand on his forearm. He nodded once. That was the whole of it. No raised fist, no tears, no statement to the room. Just a nod. The same economy of gesture he had used throughout, the same refusal to give anyone an image that could be separated from its context and made it mean something smaller than what it was. Outside the courthouse, the context was already expanding without him. Sloane Whitaker had been on camera before the doors opened. She had not sought it. A reporter had recognized her from the footage, which had been public since discovery, and had approached her on the courthouse steps with a microphone. She spoke for 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and what she said was not complicated. She had seen a man show a badge, state his name and rank, offer his precinct number, and get handcuffed anyway. She had recorded it because it had seemed important. It had turned out to be important. She did not describe herself as a hero. She described herself as someone who happened to have a charged phone. Cyprian was quoted in 3 newspapers by the following morning. He had not given a formal statement. He had simply answered questions, the same way he had narrated the footage at the pump, with the plain descriptive language of a man who understands that clarity is its own form of advocacy. The headline in the 3rd paper used his words directly. He showed them his badge. They showed him the cuffs. General Valerius Kane issued a statement before noon announcing a comprehensive review of field identification protocols across all regional enforcement operations. The statement was longer than the ones that had come before it and contained, for the first time, the word regret, deployed in the passive construction favored by institutions acknowledging error without accepting responsibility, as in, regret that the situation was not resolved differently. It was the linguistic equivalent of a half-step, and Voss noted it publicly as exactly that. Agent Dominic was reassigned pending investigation. The phrase meant, in operational practice, a change of desk and a continuation of salary, and everyone who had followed the case understood this, and the $14 million was the answer to it. Not because the money would change Dominic's desk assignment, but because it attached a number to the institutional decision to put him in that tactical triangle in the first place. The next supervisor reviewing a field operation would know the number. The next agent deciding whether to call in a badge number or reach for cuffs would exist in a legal landscape where that choice had a documented cost. That was not justice in the complete sense. It was the available version of it, and Blackwood had decided, sometime during the 4 hours under the fluorescent light, that the available version was worth pursuing. He did not retire. He had considered it. There had been a period, somewhere in the middle of the depositions, when the accumulated weight of reliving the pump and the cuffs and the cell and formal legal language had made the idea of simply stopping feel reasonable. He had a pension. He had grounds. He had 19 years that nobody could take back, whatever had happened to the 20th. But retirement felt like a period at the end of a sentence that wasn't finished yet, and Blackwood had never been comfortable leaving things incomplete. He established the Blackwood Constitutional Defense Fund 4 months after the verdict, in a modest office 2 blocks from the precinct where he still reported for duty 3 days a week. The fund offered legal representation to civilians and law enforcement officers targeted by racially motivated detentions, people who had experienced what he had experienced, but who did not have Alaric Voss's number, who had not been witnessed by Sloane Whitaker, who had not had a Cyprian narrating from the convenience store entrance. People for whom the cuffs had clicked and the cell door had closed, and no $14 million jury had ever convened. His badge had not protected him at Pump 7. He understood this now without bitterness. As a fact, the way the dimensions of the cell were a fact, the way the absence of paperwork was a fact. The badge was conditional in ways he had not fully allowed himself to see before that Wednesday morning. But his voice was not conditional. His refusal to accept the settlement, to sign the non-disclosure, to let it become a number that disappeared into a government accounting line, that had not been conditional either. Thousands of people would eventually be helped by the fund who would never know his name. He had made his peace with that. The point was never the name. The camera had been rolling the whole time. It always is. The only question is whether anyone is willing to watch, and then, having watched, whether they are willing to act. Corvus Blackwood had answered both questions. At Pump 7, and every day after it.